Good morning. It's the 12th of April, 2021. Hope you're doing well. I'm just getting over my second COVID shot, so second one is a little bit more interesting than the first. I did my first workout yesterday. I got the shot on Thursday, and I'm telling you, just the inflammation response of the body is much greater. So it's definitely something, in my case anyway, with the chills and everything. Not bad, not bad at all, but, a little bit more than I expected. But in any event, everyone who's going into law enforcement, federal law enforcement, there's one thing that's probably not on your mind that should be on your mind, and that is retirement. Okay? And when you apply for a job, one of the things that you need to look at is which law enforcement agencies in the federal government allow you to retire with the most money, with the biggest pension, okay? And you would think, well, aren't they all created the same? And the answer is no, they're not. There's two factors that I'm going to go over in this video that will greatly influence how much money you will receive in retirement and when you can retire. And the first of these is a provision of the Federal Employee Retirement System. And that's the current system that covers all career employees. Covered me, was enacted in 1986. And there's a special retirement provision that covers air traffic controllers, firefighters, and certain law enforcement officers. Okay, and the rub there is certain. And the basic benefit of that provision, if you are covered by that provision, you are allowed to retire after 25 years covered service, regardless of age. You are allowed to retire at age 50 or above after 20 years covered service. You must retire on your 57th birthday unless you were hired beyond your 37th birthday. And that's the reason for the cutoff. It's a mandatory retirement at age 57, unless you are preference eligible, in which event they can hire you, depending on what the cabinet secretary who oversees the position says, 1, 2, 3 years over your usual cutoff, which is 37. But that only applies to preference eligible veterans. Okay, so if you fall into that category, you will be able to retire early, okay? And that is, in fact, you will have to retire before you're 57. And I retired at age 52, and I think I have a very good retirement, okay? Now, what agencies are covered by this special law enforcement provision? And there are some on there that you would certainly expect, some that you wouldn't expect, some that are not on there that doesn't really make any sense. But again, it's important to know this when you're applying, because not all federal enforcement jobs, law enforcement jobs, are created equal. Now, certainly the FBI special agents, they're on there, of course. The DEA special agents, IRS special agents, ICE, ATF, basically any criminal investigator who is classed as an 1811 job series. So that's any criminal investigator is covered by this provision. So even if you work for the Department of Agriculture investigating food stamps, I don't know, you fall under this provision. Secret Service special agents obviously fall under this provision. That's really the best agency to retire from. I'll explain that later. But that is those are agencies that you would expect would be in there. Those are agencies that have been there since, going back to whenever they were created. Before FERS came into being, there was a civil service retirement system. They were all grandfathered in. They've been in that system for a long time. Now, what other federal law enforcement agencies are covered by this special provision? The Border Patrol. Okay. Some that you would not expect. The Bureau of Prisons, anyone who works or is hired in a federal prison, even if you're not a correctional officer, from a law that was enacted in the 1950s, those who are hired by the Federal Bureau of Prisons to work in an institution as opposed to work in Washington, D.C. Now, some agencies have recently been added. Customs and Border Protection officers, when they were legacy immigration inspectors, and legacy customs inspectors were not covered by the special FERS or CSRS, Civil Service Retirement System, which preceded it, law enforcement provision. They were under regular federal retirement. Now, after Homeland Security was created, CBP officers were added. Okay. Now, this provision is supposed to cover those who investigate and make arrests for violations of crime. Okay, that's who it's supposed to cover. Okay. Again, some of them do and some of them don't. The Uniform Division of the Secret Service was added in the late 1980s. Again, originally they were not covered. For many, many years, there was a Uniform Division of the Secret Service, but they weren't covered under the federal law enforcement provision. So while they were covered by federal retirement, they couldn't retire early like other law enforcement officers. And you might argue, do Uniform Division, do they do any real heavy lifting? It is what it is, okay? Other agencies that have recently been added, the United States Capitol Police were added in the late 1980s to this special law enforcement retirement provision. The United States Supreme Court Police were added in the late 1990s to this special law enforcement retirement provision. And there are others as well. I mean, I can't go through all of them. Certainly NIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, Army Criminal Investigation Division, okay? The Air Force Office of Special Investigations, they're covered. So long as you are an 1811 and it says on the vacancy announcement that there's a cutoff age of 37, you're covered. Now, which law enforcement officers are not covered? And this is just as important to know as the ones that are covered. And some that would surprise you. Any Department of Defense or military service civilian uniform police officer is not covered. So if you work for the Pentagon Police, let's say, if you work on Quantico nearby as a civilian police officer for the Marine Corps, driving around on Quantico, issuing tickets, DUIs, domestics in military housing, they're not covered. So there is no cutoff age to join, but they can't retire with the same provisions that other federal law enforcement retire at. Now, this may come as a surprise to the young lady, the officer, who shot the goofy psychiatrist at Fort Hood when he went on a rampage and shot up Fort Hood and killed a bunch of people. She very bravely shot him, paralyzed him, hit him in the spine. He's since been sentenced to death. But her job is not considered to be the arrest, and it's more protective, according to... And now, who bestows these statuses? Congress. Why do you think the Capitol Police are added? Why do you think the Supreme Court Police? Why do you think the Secret Service, which I'll get into in a minute, has better retirement than anybody? Okay, why? Well, I'll tell you why. It doesn't take a genius. You want to become a criminal investigator, you'll probably figure it out. You don't need me to tell you why. I'm just intrigued because I just saw on USA Jobs they are hiring GS-13 special agents for the Capitol Police to work in San Francisco, California. Now, why the hell would they need an agent in San Francisco? Oh, that's where the Speaker of the House lives. How foolish of me. Yeah. They can be people pouring across your border, but, these folks take care of themselves. Okay? That's the way it's always been. Okay? It's not to make you cynical. It's just, that's just the way it is. Okay? Who else is not on the list? The VA police. And there's a lot of them, actually, because they work in the VA buildings and the VA hospitals. And they go through the same training at Glencoe as any other federal police officer, but they're not covered. Okay. The United States Mint Police. Real cool recruiting video I'm going to put on for you.
Police, keep your hands on your head. Everybody put your hands on your head.
A hijacking might seem like an unlikely scenario, but as we found out at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, the Mint Police must train for every possible situation. From arrest scenarios to hand-to-hand combat to hostile traffic stops and even flying armed, the Mint Police can do it all.
Get your hands up! Get your hands up! Everybody's hands up! Get up!
Do it now! Do it now!
A 2-week intensive residential course required by the Mint for every Mint Police officer every 4 years. It puts each class through its paces, from the basics through advanced law enforcement tactics.
Pistol, holster, in the fashion in which you find it, slide to the rear and grab 3 magazines. Those folks that don't stay current, they go from 100% of their optimum capability at gunfight speed down into the 20-30 percentile.
Just as vital as training is for Mint employees, it's even more so for the Mint Police to stay a fast-acting, responsive, and motivated force.
But again, and they have vacancies right now at Fort Knox to guard the gold supply, and they're very heavily armed, but they're not on there. Okay, they're not included as a federal under the special retirement provision. How's that? Okay, the protective service, federal protective service, is not included. Okay. So when you apply, and if you go to usajobs.gov, you'll just see a huge list of police officer jobs that are open. Many of them hire at the same level as DEA or a Secret Service or ATF or ICE, and that is the GS7 level. But there's a huge difference. And that huge difference is, number one, they lack the same federal retirement provision that the other agencies, that covered agencies, have. The second thing you're going to look at, it's very important you look at that, is what is the journeyman pay grade level of the job that you are applying to. Now, if you're applying for a special agent job in the FBI, DEA, ICE, ATF, okay, if you're going to be a deputy United States Marshal, they're also covered. I should have added that. They're a covered position. It goes without saying. Any of these other agencies, but not the Border Patrol, but most criminal investigator positions, Secret Service, Special Agent, the journeyman grade is GS-13. So even though if you're applying for GS-7, the job you're really applying for is a GS-13. It's a progression. It'll say promotion potential on the job vacancy. And what this means is that you're hired at a certain grade. Let's say in my case, I was hired as a GS7. Well, after 1 year of satisfactory service as a GS7, I was then promoted to GS9. I put promoted in quotes because it's really just an advancement. You just put in a memo, I request advancement, and they approve it. You know, it's the only people who don't get approved, they're probably in the process of firing you. It's like going from E1 to E2, or second lieutenant to first lieutenant in the military. I mean, it's theoretically possible not to get it. And I knew one guy who they held it up for, but you know, you have to be the village idiot not to get it. Okay, they go from GS9 to GS11, same. GS11 to GS12, same thing. GS12 to GS13, it's a little bit more. They want to make sure you're a senior agent and you can train other people, but you're going to make it to GS13. If you make it through the academy, you don't get yourself in trouble with informants or alcohol or whatever, you're going to at least retire as a GS-13. I've never heard anyone who did not make it, who'd had 20 years in, who didn't make it to GS-13. I suppose that you might be able to find one if you look hard enough, but you'd really, really have to look hard, okay? Now, beyond GS-13 in the FBI, the DEA, ICE, these other agencies, okay, 14, 15, SES, senior executive, those are supervisory positions. Well, what about the Border Patrol? Well, they are journeymen at GS-12 level. Capitol Police has a different hiring pay scale, but when you look at what the job, what the high pay limit is, and you'll see that on the job vacancy, that's what a fully trained officer makes. The same thing with the United States Supreme Court Police, the Capitol Police, Supreme Court Police. Right now they say that a Supreme Court police officer fully trained makes about $120,000 a year. Another thing you're going to want to look at, very important, is law enforcement availability pay, because this affects your retirement. Which agencies get LEAP, availability pay? It's not overtime, it's availability pay. You get this the minute you finish the academy. And what availability pay is 25% of your salary added in. So your salary is your base pay, your locality pay, and 25% of your salary. Okay? And this is really every 1811, GS 1811 criminal investigator. So again, FBI, DEA, Secret Service, ICE, ATF, all of these guys get this. Okay? So does the Border Patrol. They were added to this. Now it's not overtime. If you're working in a headquarters position and you leave after 8 hours, you didn't do your overtime. I don't get paid overtime. Okay, it's premium pay, it's availability pay. It's pay to be available 24/7. Are you available 24/7? Of course I am. Got a phone, I'm all set to go. And when you're in the field, you certainly will make up for those hours. But it's not overtime the way that, the police, for instance, are paid overtime. You're a Fair Labor Standards Act exempt employee. Okay. Customs and Border Protection has to be overtime. It's time and a half. They are not, so they actually have to work overtime to get it, and they probably can get it. Same with the Capitol Police, the Supreme Court Police, some of these other agencies that wear uniforms, Uniform Secret Service Uniform Division. Okay, in order for them to get overtime, they have to actually work overtime. Okay, so that is a difference, and that will certainly add up and focus on how much you get in retirement. Now, how much do you get in retirement? How is this calculated? Well, it's calculated by your high three. Your high three is the most money you made in your career. For most of us, it's the last 3 years, unless you got in trouble and were reduced in grade. So in my case, my high three was $156,000 a year. That included my base pay, my locality pay. I was a 14 step 10 by the time I retired. Locality pay in DC, availability pay. And that's what it came out to, $156,000 a year in 2012. Okay, you get 1.7% of that multiplied by 20 for your covered first 20 years. That's 34%, and then 1% for every year thereafter. And since you're under 62, you also get a supplement, a federal employee retirement system supplement, because we are mandated to retire. You get an extra $1,000 a month until you're eligible to apply for Social Security. And again, this only applies to those who are under the special federal employment provision. So again, my retirement, came out to about 41% thereabouts. And then with my first supplement, it's about 43% of what I was making. And with a little bit of, deductions and withdrawals from TSP, and you just find a small job somewhere, I was able to live just as comfortably, basically, as I was as a law enforcement agent, okay, as an active duty agent. But again, if your terminal grade is at a lower grade level, that's why you want to look at what the grade level is at your journeyman level. If it's GS 11, you're not going to make as much as a GS 14. If it's GS 12, you'll do pretty well, but you're not going to make as much as a GS 14. Now again, if you're applying for the Department of Defense Police, it's GS 7, terminal grade is GS 9, but you're not covered by this retirement at all. You got to wait till you're 62 to retire. So it's a huge difference. It's something that you do need to understand when you look for a job. Because what I advise you to do, if you want to get into a federal investigative job, get a covered position, because that gets you in the door. A non-covered position does not get you in the door. If you age out, it's just too bad. You could still be doing law enforcement work. I get it. I'm not arguing that point. Congress hasn't bestowed this benefit on every agency. So it's important that you know what agencies are the best to work for, which are the worst. What is the best agency to work for? It's the United States Secret Service. Hands down, I've never found anyone in that job. And they actually re-employ their annuitants. Now, what does that mean? Well, when you retire from the federal government, when I retired, I can't take a federal job. Let's say I wanted to work for the VA. I can take that job, but I can't. They'll deduct my retirement pay from my salary because they don't want you double dipping. Now, what agency can you double dip in? Well, why are you surprised if it's a sneaky service? It is a secret service. If you're a retired Secret Service agent, they can hire you as a GS-13 special agent background investigator, and you can collect GS-13 pay with availability pay doing backgrounds, plus your retirement pay. Okay? Again, the president takes care of his own. Okay? That's how it works. I had a buddy in my religious, I'm a Catholic deacon, if you haven't figured that out. We were in the ordination class. He was retired Secret Service, and he got a good job with the Air Marshals as a GS-15 as a reemployed annuitant, because they were forming Homeland Security at that time. And he got GS-15 pay with overtime plus his Secret Service retirement. He was making over 200 some odd thousand a year in retirement. I've never met one of those guys who didn't do well. Okay, Secret Service does well. DEA, when they retire, they may or may not do well. But really, those who do the best seem to be the United States Secret Service. Who does the worst in retirement? Well, again, if you have a low journeyman grade, let's say you're a Department of Defense police, your retirement, you may retire out, or a VA police officer. You may retire as a GS-11 or GS-12, but again, you're not retiring on the federal retirement. You're only getting 1% if you retire below age 62, and if it's after 62, you only get 1.1% of your high 3 multiplied by your years of service. So there's a huge difference in what kind of job you get, and it makes a huge difference, as to how much money you're going to get in retirement, whether you're going to have to work in retirement, how old you'll be when you retire. So these things are important. Life isn't always fair. I'm the first one to say that. But hopefully this has been somewhat useful. I mean, after talking about wild FBI shootouts and crazy informants and everything like that, it's something that, before I go into further, because I want to speak about Department of Defense agencies, because some of them are covered and some of them aren't, and this way you'll know what I'm speaking of. So hopefully this has been informative to you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thank you.